At 0940 hours, 500 feet above the Pacific, the C-17 Globemaster pilot fixes his gaze on a target. A 560-foot submarine that looks like a thin pencil stroke across an ocean the size of Russia. He has precisely one opportunity to strike this moving object with a 50-pound package while flying a 412,000-pound aircraft that handles like a towering building in a storm. Miss by 50 meters and 3 years of planning collapse into catastrophe. Strike the submarine, and he will find himself explaining to Congress how he accidentally bombed a $2.1 billion nuclear platform. The margin for error is 0. 30 seconds remain. This moment began 6 hours earlier at 0530 on October 22, 2020. A C-17 Globemaster departs Hickam Air Force Base in Hawaii, carrying what might either transform submarine logistics or prove that some ideas are better on PowerPoint. 4 Pratt & Whitney F117 PPW-100 turbofans shove 412,000 pounds of airframe and experimental cargo into the morning gloom, launching a mission to locate one specific submarine somewhere in an ocean that covers 1/3 of the Earth's surface. The mission sounds simple. Fly 800 meters northwest, rendezvous with the USS Henry M. Jackson, drop off supplies, return home. But this was no routine resupply. Their objective was a 560-foot submarine that had been submerged and drifting for 6 hours, keeping radio silence while Pacific currents pushed her miles from any predictable point. Searching for a black hole in blue water when your search area approximates the size of Russia gives you better odds finding a needle in Manhattan. As the C-17 approaches the sub's last known coordinates, its AN/APS-133 maritime search radar begins painting surface contacts out to 250 nautical miles. Watch the radar operator's screen as green blips cascade across the display like digital rain. Each blip could be a contact, a wave return, floating debris, marine life, or the submarine they hunt. Distinguishing a submarine's minimal surface signature from wave clutter demands pattern recognition earned over years of scanning hostile seas. Navigation at 0730 hours, 400 meters off Hawaii and nearing the designated search grid, the navigator finally receives the submarine's first signal since submerging. The burst lasts just 1.3 seconds, barely enough time to transmit new coordinates, confirming that the Henry M. Jackson has drifted 4.2 nautical miles northeast of her intended position. Such displacement isn't unusual for a submarine holding station without propulsion, but it's sufficient to wreck the crew's original search plan. The approach is recalculated while the radar operator widens his sweep pattern. The Henry M. Jackson has been intentionally erratic in her drift to avoid leaving any predictable trail for enemy forces. Excellent for stealth, disastrous for anyone trying to locate her with a cargo jet. Inside the cargo bay, the experimental package rests, lashed down with simple straps, 50 pounds of, "Let's see if this works." It's wrapped in waterproof layers and strapped into a Type 4 personal flotation device, giving it the look of a vacationing suitcase. No GPS tracker, no electronic beacon, no advanced recovery hardware. That absence is by design. Complicated systems fail. Buoyant foam does not. At 0915 hours, the radar finally registers what they've been chasing. A faint, flickering contact appears precisely where the submarine's coordinates suggested, almost indistinguishable from sea clutter, yet showing the steady return of something solid rolling on the swells. The signal vanishes for several cycles as waves bury the hull, only to return stronger when the sub adjusts her trim. The pilot banks toward the faint mark, while the crew steels themselves for what lies ahead. No one has ever attempted to resupply a submarine using a heavy strategic airlifter. There are obvious reasons. The C-17 was engineered to haul tanks onto runways, not drop packages onto submarines. But if successful, it could rewrite submarine logistics entirely. Locating the target was only step one. Now came the precision strike. At 0925 hours, the C-17 commits to what pilots generously label an uncomfortable dive, leveling at 500 feet above the Pacific. At this height, the enormous transport stops behaving like a conventional airplane and begins to wallow like a 412,000-pound aluminum leviathan with lousy handling. The pilot eases the throttles back and immediately learns why the flight manual sternly warns against low-altitude runs over open water. The aircraft answers control inputs like a dump truck trying to race at the Indy 500. Beneath them, the USS Henry M. Jackson appears as 560 feet of black steel carving through Pacific swells. Her hydrodynamic hull, built to slip through water with minimal drag, presents a target about as wide as a two-lane road. Now add the fact that both platforms are in motion, the ocean is doing whatever it wants, and the scene looks less like a military operation and more like attempting darts during an earthquake, and it deteriorates from there. Ground effect turns the final approach into a bruising contest with basic physics. When you fly something the size of a C-17 this close to the sea, the air squeezed between wing and water has nowhere to escape quickly, producing erratic cushions of lift. One moment, you're descending smoothly. The next, you're ballooning upward as if someone slid a trampoline under the airplane. The submarine crew has its own headaches. Holding a precise surface position demands a careful choreography of ballast tanks, trim adjustments, and just enough propulsion to counter currents without leaving a telltale wake for any overhead satellite. The crew constantly tweaks trim, shifting water among tanks to keep the vessel level, while Pacific swells try to turn the boat into the world's priciest seesaw. Then there's the RIB, a rigid-hull inflatable launched from the sub with 4 sailors who almost certainly didn't envision this duty when they enlisted. Their 7-meter boat rides the swells well, but maneuvering into position to recover a package while avoiding both a submarine and a low-flying cargo plane demands spatial awareness usually seen only in high-end video games. Radio coordination across 3 separate platforms pushes voice communications to their limits. The submarine feeds heading and speed updates every 30 seconds. The RIB crew calls in their location relative to the larger vessels while bouncing across swells, and the C-17 crew is computing approach vectors while the airplane itself fights them back. The pilot finds that holding exactly 120 knots indicated airspeed is like trying to lock a precise number on a temperamental slot machine. Too fast, and the package will overshoot the recovery zone by hundreds of meters. Too slow, and the C-17's flight computers start screaming about approaching stall margins, because nothing spells catastrophe like stalling a strategic airlifter over open ocean. The acceptable envelope is precisely 120 knots, plus or minus nothing. At 500 feet, even minor turbulence feels like riding a mechanical bull. The aircraft's fly-by-wire logic, tuned for high-altitude efficiency, offers precious little assistance for this kind of low, slow work. It's like asking a Formula One car to enter a tractor pull. Yes, it has engines and landing gear, but that's where the likeness ends. The submarine runs a practice pass beneath them, letting everyone verify timing and synchronization. The loadmaster peers through the small crew door window, watching 18,750 tons of submarine slide by within eyeshot. The sight underscores how surgically precise the maneuver must be. Miss the drop zone, and the best outcome is a lost package. The worst outcome is demonstrating exactly why no one has attempted this. dropping 50 pounds of test gear onto a nuclear submarine. Everything hinges on the next circuit. When 3 years of planning collide with 5 minutes of execution, at 09:35 hours, the C-17 aligns for its approach while the submarine holds a heading of 285 degrees at a constant 6 knots. Fast enough to keep control, yet slow enough to limit the target's drift. The rib settles 200 meters off the submarine's starboard side, close enough for a quick pickup, but far enough to avoid becoming collateral if things unravel. At the crew door, the loadmaster readies the test package, held by quick-release gear that's basically a dressed-up carabiner. Through the narrow window, he keeps the submarine in view, mentally crunching drop physics no onboard computer will solve. This is pure instinct math, estimating the lead angle needed to land 50 pounds of hope inside a moving target zone scarcely bigger than a basketball court. Inside the C-17, the pilots battle to hold flight parameters that feel absurdly exacting for a machine of this size. Airspeed must hold at 120 knots, not 119, not 121. Altitude fixed at 500 feet, not 490, not 510. Heading must perfectly match the submarine's, since even a slight crossing angle multiplies the complexity of an already impossible task. The flight engineer calls out every minor drift, while the pilot fights back with corrections that feel like threading a needle while wearing boxing gloves. On final approach, the pulled 50 pounds of experimental optimism tumble from the aircraft, beginning its descent toward either success or a formal inquiry. The package plummets with all the elegance of a concrete block, wobbling as air resistance and gravity wrestle for control. The pilots hold steady for a few critical seconds, every eye strained toward the sea. Impact! The package splashes down about 150 meters ahead of the submarine and 1,000 meters to starboard, not precise, but still inside the recovery envelope. The flotation collar inflates instantly, popping the container back to the surface, where it drifts like the most valuable pool toy on Earth. The RIB crew leaps into action, throttles wide as they dash to secure it, haul it aboard, and stow their craft. The significance of this moment goes far beyond proving the US can airdrop supplies onto submarines. It means subs can remain deployed longer, operate in waters without nearby allies, and receive critical resupply without revealing their position. The most survivable arm of America's nuclear triad just became even more formidable. End of test.